multiple people on this project, but the core team being from APS, Four Corners Economic Development, and Northwest New Mexico COG. So with this, you'll hear from each of those folks today. So I just want to thank you for being here and introduce Warren to come on up, and he's going to start. We're going to get you kind of a story in order here of what we've done so far and where we hope to go.
Thank you all for coming this morning. We really appreciate the opportunity to share with you the results of this exciting forum that we held that brought 4 states and numerous tribes to come together and come up with plans of how we as a region can work together to build a future for our economy. And so why regionalism though? You know, so many people are wondering, why do we need to do this together when we have our own separate goals and initiatives that we're working on? And we understand that everyone will continue on with the great projects and programs that they're working on right now, but we're missing out and leaving things on the table if we don't look at our opportunities as a region and as various different communities and peoples in this area. We have more in common than we have different for this region. More similarities that bring us together and give us opportunities to do bigger, broader things than we can do separately. We have a lot of common resources. Agriculture is a big one for this area, be it the things that we have at NAPI or the major agricultural projects in Colorado, the churro sheep on the Navajo Nation, the beef that the Navajo Nation is working to put out. There are a lot of similarities there and a lot of opportunities to brand those things and bring in more attention to this area. Tourism as a destination, the Four Corners has notoriety throughout the nation and throughout the world as a destination with cultural and natural resources that you can't find anywhere else. And we can use our resources together to market that to the nation and to the world. Infrastructure are things that we share in this area. We're such a tight-knit and close community in these 4 states that we share airports, we share transportation. There are opportunities for rail and for new flights coming in and out of this region. And so we're working towards these bigger, broader projects that help the entire area. Likewise, broadband infrastructure provides redundancy and capabilities to provide information and education in areas that normally would not be able to have it. And so we look to find ways to bring those pieces together and accomplish bigger, broader goals. And likewise, garner bigger, broader grants, opportunities to bring monies into the area and to fund these goals. And so with that, we're going to continue this effort. This wasn't just a one and done event. This report that we put out is just the beginning. We're going to be gathering input from others as we continue this on. And with that, I'm going to let Jeff Kiley with the Northwest New Mexico COG describe a little bit of what came out of these results and from all the great partners that came to this forum. Jeff?
Thank you, Warren. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So this, I really like the way that Warren talked about this concept of regionalism. And as we put this whole program together, we were talking about thinking regionally and acting locally. You've heard the old saw about thinking globally and acting locally, but we thought if we can think regionally and act locally, that would help us to leverage a lot more with each other than we could alone. We also talked about thinking locally and acting regionally. So what you can do is you can begin to aggregate these commonalities that we have and create a stronger voice for the whole Four Corners. What would it be like if we had 8 senators in the Congress going to bat for what we come up with in this region? What would it be like if we had 13 members of Congress all banding together as a rural caucus, as a Four Corners rural caucus? So those are the kinds of things that inspired us as we pulled all of this together. And so therefore, I think that everything that we were trying to do in this forum was about unity in diversity, not unity in conformity, not trying to create a top-down regionalism, but sort of a ground-up regionalism, where we discover those commonalities that we can work on. In the meantime, as Warren was saying, people are going to keep doing what they're doing. The private sector is going to keep on looking for opportunity. The public sector is going to keep on scrambling to find out how do we best support the local economy. That's going to continue to go. So how can we kind of gather together? So 10 years ago, we tried We had a report, Dr. Henderson will remember this, we had a report 10 years ago, which we called Energy, Economy, and the Environment. And it was actually a really good report, very well balanced and full of good information. Its purpose was to support dialogue among the people of the region, of the San Juan Basin in particular, on these issues of energy and economy and the environment. And at that time, we gathered 35 or 40 leaders of the community, county commissioners, mayor, councilors, managers, and so on. And they said, this is a great report, but we need you to kind of keep it quiet for now because we do not trust the public process. We do not trust that if we, from the industry or from government open up, we don't trust that that information will be handled in a good faith manner and that we can continue forward with those. If we're trying to reach out to different constituencies, we don't want to be taken advantage of and have things go adversely against us. So fast forward 10 years forward, and here we are, and we actually pulled it off. We actually pulled off a forum with a diversity of players in that meeting, able to talk about stuff. Now, we didn't come up with consensus on everything. So we still have, one of the results was at least an understanding that we've got a diverse energy mix, that we have the traditional natural resource economies that have driven the economy of this region, and that we don't want to act precipitously to suppress or to do away with all of that asset base that has driven us so far. At the same time, there was an acknowledgement that there are trends afoot in the world. There are market trends that suggest we need to start we need to accelerate our diversification efforts in the economy. And so we did look at all these different things, and Warren sort of forecasted these areas. We actually pulled people together across disciplines, across geographies, and we pulled them together around things like capacity building. I know Four Corners Economic Development identified that very early on, that you can talk about all these things in health industry, energy industry, and so on. If we don't have certain capacities, infrastructure capacity, workforce capacity, if we don't have those kinds of capacities, it's going to be very difficult to pull in new industry and to foster new industry from within. And so we talked about capacity building. We had a whole section on that. I was able to be the facilitator. I think we had 2 sessions, and I facilitated that, and we generated just a lot of really good material to work with. We had a group on energy. Some people thought it went real well. Some people thought it didn't go too well. But we did grapple with the whole issue of what is the energy future of the Four Corners? What does it look like? What is the ramp up of alternative energy opportunities? What is the ramp down of certain conventional industries? And where's that intersection? And what do we do about it as a region? We had another group on agriculture, as Warren was saying. That's something that we hold in common. Now, if you look at the statistics of our agricultural efforts in this whole region, it's kind of spotty. Again, there's a diversity. In some parts of the region, agriculture is very weak, even though historically it was a very strong basis of sustenance for the community. But now, statistically, as an economic factor, it's become very weak. In other parts of our region, very strong. And we thought that we had opportunities in this region to grow that sector for a number of reasons, not only because we have NAPI here, not only because we have strong agriculture in southern Colorado, but also because there's a movement afoot to start feeding ourselves in regions and localities. Instead of depending on global trade, we start to talk about how we can feed ourselves locally and become a source of agricultural products to the world. We had a group on health, and it wasn't just about our health as human beings, as families, but it was about healthcare as an industry. So we talked about what are the opportunities that we can build upon our health industry here and grow that as an opportunity for growth in the area. We talked about the creative economy. By that we mean the arts and their role not just in providing a colorful tapestry for our community, but as actually becoming more economic drivers. So how do we take the artistic talent of the region, which is quite substantial, but how can we transform and convert that into a stronger economic driver? We talked about manufacturing, and in many ways that's often been linked with the energy economy. So a lot of manufacturing has just been spun off from, it's been service to, supplier to the industry, energy industry. But we also are exploring other manufacturing opportunities in the region. And we talked a lot about the natural resource base, the natural gas, of course, which we are famous for, which we have abundant supply for. How can we think differently about that resource and move it into a manufacturing, move it into expanded manufacturing opportunities? We did talk about tourism. Again, Warren was referring to the fact that all of us in this huge region, what are we, about maybe 25,000 square miles worth of this region? We talked about tourism being a common pull for the world, and yet we're not taking as much advantage of it as we could. And we are not systematically taking that opportunity and moving it into systematic economic development efforts. So there's a lot of discussion in tourism. We talked also about technology. Again, not only the technology that supports, our industries like broadband, better roads, things like that, but we talked about technology as industry. What can we do to promote new technologies as part of what we do and who we are in this region? And then finally, we talked about a thing called location-neutral work. Some people call it solo work. This whole idea of either the lone eagle aspect of creating such a community that people of means and talent and global connection just want to move here. And they want to live here, and they want to enjoy everything about being here, and they also want to make their living by being here. And so we talked about what are the opportunities there, and if there are opportunities there, then how do we go about things so it's not just happenstance? So that somebody shows up and comes to visit Chris or somebody to visit the resources in this center, and they say, can you help me? Can you help me get my foot here? How can we be more proactive? And how can we create more opportunity there? So there was quite a lot of dialogue in all of those areas. And this report, which we've now put up on a website, and Warren will be sharing that website with you in a moment, but this report is actually an excellent report that captures all of the diverse input from the forum. The purpose of the forum was not just to be a showcase for talking heads to demonstrate their expertise and kind of teach us all about everything, but we brought in specific kinds of resources to stimulate our thinking, and among those were a group from Minnesota, the Region 5 Development Commission. They're a kind of a sister organization to the Northwest New Mexico Council of Governments, and they've done some things up in Minnesota that Melissa will be sharing a little bit more about, because we actually, after our forum, we actually sent a delegation to Minnesota and said, how in the heck did you do this? How did you bring diverse groups together, and how did you build momentum of collaboration? They brought in $40 to $50 million of new resources, both public and private, into their region, just as their region was in a sort of a downward decline. And then they turned it around. How did they do that? So Melissa will be sharing a little bit more on that. So we also learned from a number of different people about, including the CEO of the International Economic Development Council, who impressed upon us that it used to be back in the day that if you were an economic recruiter, if you were an industrial recruiter, you would try to make sure that you had buildings that were built to spec, that you had infrastructure, that you had all these physical things, financial incentives, things like that. And that was your key. If you had that golden key, you would go out there, you would open doors, and they would just flow into your community. He now says that workforce is number one. And in his talk, he said, if you don't do more about preparing a workforce that is ready to answer the call of new employers, then those new employers just won't come or they won't stay. And so that placed our higher education community and our workforce development community into sort of the firing line now. And San Juan College has stepped up big time. And now we have collaborations that are emerging with Fort Lewis College, Dannett College, Navajo Technical University, even NAU, who's been in correspondence with us about some of the findings that they've got out in this part of the world. And that's going to be a very big part going forward. So coming up in a few minutes, Arvin Trujillo from APS Four Corners Power Plant is going to share with us all some of the next steps that we're going to take. At first we thought we could have a big conference like this, and then everybody would kind of hug and kiss at the end of it, and then we'd have a detailed action path going forward. And we realized, especially after we got into it, that there was so much diversity of opinion around things and so much that people wanted to talk about that coming to a consensus would have been untimely and probably unwise. But to generate a lot of really good ideas, that was great. But we are all committed. You have a core committee representing the institutions that led this thing. But we also have a group, I don't know how many we've got now, well over 100, because we had 140 right there at the forum. We had a number of others who wanted to come and couldn't come, so we've got maybe 200 plus to draw from. And we've even got a group of what you might call champions, or people willing to raise their hand and say, yeah, I'd like to lead that conversation across boundaries, across districts. I'd like to move something forward. So I really do think that we have an opportunity to do something. We are all committed to not letting this stay on our shelves. We're all committed to making it a living document and a living, breathing movement, I guess you might say, here in the Four Corners. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and ask Melissa to come on up to share with us some of the insights they gained from this trip that they took to the Region 5 Development Commission in Minnesota. Melissa?
I'm going to go with the idea I probably don't need to introduce myself again. I think my counterparts touched on a lot of the important things that actually led to the trip to Minnesota. As they indicated, Shirley Hills, the Region 5 team, or their project they call the Resilient Region, came down to the forum and presented to the group. We'd been talking to them for some time and knew they had good stuff, but I don't think we really knew how good till they came down. And as Jeff just alluded to, we didn't really know where we were going next until we sat in that room full of people. You know, one thing we've really been passionate about is that this isn't our project. We don't want to drive the ship. We want the region to drive the ship. So we come with our ideas and we kind of think we know where we're going, but then we get feedback that says otherwise, and we need to flex and adjust to that. So we quickly learned a couple things. The first, it goes back to even what Jeff started with, and that's the trust piece. So we have a lot of people that are interested, that want to engage, but they're cautiously moving forward. They're dipping their toe in the water. They're not quite ready to jump in and swim. And so we really needed to understand how they built those relationships up there. Region 5 is a little different in that they are a mandated area. They work across county lines, but they're mandated by policy to do that, whereas we're trying to do it because we know it's the best thing for this region. So, you know, they're being told that they have to play in the same sandbox, but if you watch a bunch of 5-year-olds, not that I'm saying anybody's 5, but if you watch 5-year-olds, just because you tell them to play in the same box doesn't mean they're going to play together. So they still had to do a lot of work on that trust piece and how to build those relationships and how to get people moving together and willing to commit to that. So that was a big piece of what we wanted to learn from them. We really wanted to see how they put that into action. You know, how do you get 200 people to work together? You have to have a structure in place. How did they get people from all the regions involved, because their area is pretty vast too. So it, you know, it's a commitment for those folks to drive and be a part of those committees and groups. And then how did they fund it? Because it's really awesome to have a bunch of great ideas, but the world operates on money, and you know, we aren't necessarily buried in that just amongst the 4 of our people or even the 200 in the room. So how did they fund those opportunities? As Jeff alluded to, they brought millions and millions into that region. So We spent 2 days. We competed with the Super Bowl. We didn't know that when we went up there, so that was fun, not to mention the ice and the winter us New Mexicans got to experience. But they put on a heck of a show. I mean, they really opened their arms to us. And Cheryl Lee, first of all, the biggest thing I learned is that woman's a genius. I mean, she does some phenomenal work. She knows how to read people. She knows how to build teams. And she shared all of that with us. I mean, it was an open book. Any question we asked was not off limits. And we asked some pretty frank questions. You know, what did you do when this happened? You know, did everybody want to work together? What happened when you had conflicting priorities? And beyond that, she brought all the stakeholders in. I mean, we spent meeting after meeting with different people. So we met with her advisory board. We met with her core team. We met with community leaders. We met just anybody that she worked with that she felt had something important to give us. She arranged for them to be a part of those meetings. And so we were very, very blessed that they hosted us. They hosted us well, and we had so much time to talk and ask questions and find out. We saw the ultimate thing to me was how through this work, which they've been doing this for several years, you know, that was the first thing we had to wake up and realize is this isn't going to be a one-year solution, you know. This is ongoing and ongoing. But they're a family now. We sat and had lunch with her core team, and they're old friends. And she'll tell you, they started out with the project first. They were not people that knew each other first. But they worked together so long towards the common goal that their relationship is deeper than business. We got to go out and see some of their sites. With her, when she came down, we got to learn about the Sprout Project. But the Sprout Project's actually bigger than what we think of when we hear Sprout. It's actually a maker market. So that creative economy we're talking about. They have a really phenomenal space where they promote creator sale. They've created entrepreneurs. And they're actually just now starting to track the depth of the impact on that. So they get to meet at this maker's market and sell, but people are getting major contracts to do work elsewhere. So they're starting to document how deep and how far that reaches economically. We got to learn how they brought culture into what they're doing, both in support of funding, but in support of building relationships in the region. They have, like we do, they actually have a very uniquely diverse economy and diverse peoples. And so they've found a way to build that into the work that they're doing. So they're valuing the individual, they're valuing their independent communities as part of the ongoing work. We discussed again how they funded it. I mean, they've received grants upon grants just to operate the work, but then how they fund these little projects like Sprout and how they keep things going, how they got stakeholders to partner with the public, how they got the government to partner with the stakeholders just to make the magic happen. And they've done some really impressive things. So we were there for 2 days. It felt like 2 weeks. I learned so much. And we had to come home and kind of, you know, go back over that. We had a team meeting, and what did you hear? What did I hear? We put it down on paper, and then we had to look realistically at where we've come and figure out where we're going versus where we thought we were going to go next. We looked at the report, and what did we gain out of that report? And really the biggest thing I think we learned very quickly was that we needed more input. They did a very good job in Minnesota about garnering input from all of their public. You know, we like to bring the business leaders together and the government together, and we all talk about it. But they asked the single moms. They asked the people that are on the ground living in those communities, what keeps you up at night? What keeps you in this community? Why are you passionate? When the decline hits, why do you stay when other people are leaving? Because that really told them what's needed. Because business leaders, we like to think we know so much and we're so educated, but the community is the public is the biggest part of the community. So if you can't have their buy-in, if you don't have their support, those projects aren't going to succeed. So with that, we really felt like we had to shift a little bit about where we thought we were going. We want to continue to value that 140 that's already been a part of the process and bring them in, but we need to expand and bring others in as well. So that's actually what Arvin's piece of the story is going to be, is now that we know all this stuff, we have this great report, we've had wonderful feedback, we went to Minnesota, we learned all that good stuff too. Where do we go from here, and how do we keep the momentum going? So with that, I'm going to bring up Mr. Arvin Trujillo with APS to share his piece of the story.
Thank you, Melissa. My name is Arvin Trujillo. I'm the manager for government relations with Arizona Public Service Company with the Four Corners Power Plant. And I'm from this area. Grew up, went to high school at Kermit, and enjoyed being in the area. Now, we've heard a lot about what we've experienced and what we've done. But again, looking at why we did it, I think that's an important part of the story. There are tremendous challenges and changes that are happening within our economic and our community development realm here in the Four Corners area. I am one of the products of that. As long as I've been in this area, we've had power plants, we've had oil, we've had gas companies, we've had the necessary industry to support those major areas. Whenever some of the oil or gas companies saw a downturn here in the San Juan Basin, they went up to the Powder River Basin in Wyoming, or they went down to the Permian Basin down in West Texas. But it was like a triangle. And I've had the opportunity to work up in the Powder River Basin as a mining engineer. And people that I knew here in Farmington, I saw up in Gillette, Wyoming. And so again, it was something that we looked at over the past 50, 60 years. We've depended on the power plants, we've depended on the oil and gas industry, but economics have changed, both from a business standpoint as well as from a political standpoint. And given those changes, we have got to begin to look at what are we going to be doing here in the Four Corners area. Now, I've had an opportunity to speak to a number of different people, and every time I talk to different people, they come in and they say, you know, I like this place. This is a really nice place to live. I want to bring my family up here. And I've had people actually transfer into this area to live. We are one of the best kept secrets in the United States. And what we want to do here with this effort is to break that, to show people what we have to offer, and to show some of the things that, how they as companies and their employees can benefit by living in this area, but also how we can also benefit from that opportunity. You've heard from the three speakers what we've accomplished up to this point. What I'm here to talk about is where do we go from here? As Melissa indicated, we started out with an idea. We started out with a plan. But just like a basketball game, halfway in the contest, you got to come back in and regroup, and coach says, okay, they're doing some different things, or we're learning some different things, so let's change so that we are successful at the end of the game. That's what happened to us. We had a plan. We thought, okay, this is the way it's going to work. Boy, were we wrong. But we came back together. We had a lot of input from a lot of different people. But what we want to do now is we want to go the next step. We're looking at culminating in a second forum this fall. But before we get there, as Melissa indicated, we need more input. We're going to go we're going to take two tracks to accomplish that. On the one track, we're going to be going back to the economic development organizations as well as the Council of Governments in the region. We're going to bring their expertise together. We're going to describe exactly where we are, what we learned in Minnesota, how we want to proceed in our next steps. In that, what we're going to be looking at is to develop a series of state sub-regional meetings in the area of the key stakeholders, business, community leaders, government leaders in those particular regions. And when I talk about regions, I'm saying we're looking at the four-state area: Southwest Colorado, Northwest New Mexico, Northeast Arizona, and Southeast Utah. Looking at those regions along with the tribes and talking to their leadership to see Who are those important individuals that we need to bring in? The goal of that roadshow, where we provide that presentation to the leadership, is to do what Melissa indicated. We want public hearings in all these areas. We've got to go out to the public and find out, what are they looking at? What's important to them? What are their concerns? What do they see as priorities for this area? You know, that stays with, you're living in this area, what do you expect? What are your expectations? What should we be doing as government leaders, as business leaders, as industry leaders? What should we be doing in order to help you? And again, the idea is, how do we begin to build this area so that we have a teeming community in this 4-state region? And so that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be looking at these road shows in the 4 states areas along with the tribes. And again, the idea there is to get the public input directly. On the other side, we're going to do a second track. As the previous speakers have spoken, we had the forum. We had about 140 people attend the day-and-a-half sessions. From that, about 70 have indicated they want to continue to participate. They want to be actively involved in this effort. So for no better name, you know, we're calling it, well, let's have a meeting of the 70, bringing them together. And what we want to do is, we have 9 theme areas that they all, different ones commented and provided input on. We want to bring those 9 themes together and have them have the strategic discussions. And from that, to begin to determine, from their points of view, what do they see as the priority? What should we be really working on? Where should we put our efforts? And in that same instance, how do we begin to build them together as teams, as interdisciplinary teams, so that they begin to work together to look at these priorities in a more holistic manner? How do we do this? And these are things that we learn from our benchmarking trip up to Minnesota. Looking at how they begin to gain input from the different areas, the different sectors within communities, and from there begin to find, where are the overlaps? Where's the common ground? What makes sense? How do we get people to buy into what we want to try to achieve for a given area? Because again, the idea here from a local aspect is, how do we come together and work together as a team? Yes, we will compete, but instead of competing amongst ourselves, why not compete with the rest of the U.S. as a collective group? That's what we strive to do. And so again, that second track, we're looking at this month to see if we can get that initiated. We're looking at this month to get the EDOs and the COGs together to start that process out. We're looking to have this information together by the June timeframe of this year. And by the June timeframe, begin to develop, using this information, how do we begin to build the information in anticipation of having a second forum? That second forum will be focused on federal agencies and state agencies, to bring them in. But not to just bring them in and say, what projects do they have available? What loan programs do they have available, etc. I used to work for the Navajo Nation. I've been through those types of meetings. What we want to do is, we want to make a change on that and say, here's what we plan to do. Here's what we want to do. Here's what we see as our priorities. How can you partner with us in an effective manner to achieve these objectives and these goals? That's what we want to look at with the second forum, so that we begin to develop true partnerships. And we began to see that in the forum. We had a young lady from the BLM who heard about the discussion on public lands and what we were wanting to try to do. She, as a part of the government, stepped up and said, I'll be on that action team, because we need to figure out how to use the public lands in our area in an effective manner. That's what we're looking for. And so again, as we begin to start building this process, we're working towards that final stage of having that second forum so that we can build a strategy for the Four Corners region. So at the end of the day, we are no longer the best kept secret in the United States. I would like for us, just like anybody anywhere else in the U.S., to turn the TV on and suddenly you start seeing the Four Corners on national TV saying, come, enjoy, bring your business here. We have much to offer. That's what we're looking for. Because again, we are in a time of transition and change. We have the opportunities to try to guard it, to fear everything about it, to just sit there and hope. Or we have the opportunity to look at this and say, man, yeah, there's challenges, but there are tremendous opportunities here for us to come together and to achieve what in many cases people have told us that it's impossible. And so again, this is a new experiment for this part of the country. Why? Because this is something that we want to build from the ground up. We want to build from the grassroots and bring it up, rather than a top-down model that says, well, here's the money, here's the organization, here's how you're going to do it. We want to get input from the public and from our leaders locally so we can begin to build this up, so we can go to the state, we can go to the federal government, we can go to industry, and we say, you know what, this is what we want to do. Join us. We got an idea, we got a plan. Come, let's walk together to achieve what would be beneficial for this area. And so again, I see a lot, I'm passionate about this because I'm from this area. I grew up in this area. I would love to see my children live in this area. But you know what? I got one child that lives in Oregon, works for Nike. I got another child that lives in Denver, works for a computer company. I got another child who's getting ready to move to Baltimore, Maryland, working for Johns Hopkins. But you know what? It'd be great if they could still keep those jobs, but live here in the Four Corners area. Because in that way, they can contribute to the community and to the local area, maybe even being a part of chapter government and helping guide those. Because we need the young folks. I'm getting gray now, you know? I want to be able to turn this over to somebody who can then build from where we started. And so that's my dream. And that's all of our dreams. The COG, Four Corners Economic Development, San Juan College, we all have a stake in this. And so this is important to us, and we feel it's important to the community. So I'll turn it over back to Warren.
Well, thank you, Arvin, and I think that encapsulated it perfectly, why we're here and why we're doing what we're doing. And I want to thank everyone for coming today as well. And I want to thank again those that kind of helped kick this off. APS contributed a great deal of time, energy, and monies to this effort. Likewise, Northwest New Mexico COG and the Power Report that kind of helped us flesh out why we're doing this. San Juan College and the immense lift of supporting this both with staff and with time and with money and with the facilities that they provide here. And so the ongoing efforts will continue, but we need everyone else to buy in. Without everyone else's buy-in and assistance, and this doesn't happen. We can hope for it all we want, but it requires everyone in this region to come together and work together to make it happen. With that, be sure to go to our website, the 4cornersconsortium.com. The press release and all of the information in the report, the full report, is listed there, so you can download it and look through it and see all the great input we received from the attendees we had at that conference. And moving forward, we will make sure to keep everyone informed, and we'll update that website regularly with new information and meeting dates and everything that's coming down the pike to make this happen. So again, thank you all for coming this morning, and we look forward to to sharing the future of the Four Corners with you as we continue.
Thank you.
And we'll be around for questions if anyone has any questions for the speakers. We